You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's ride!
Oh, a cozy evening to you all, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're doing well. It is a Thursday night. Traditionally, Thursdays are just one of my favorite nights to do on this show. It's just perfect. Perfect. We've had a really great week. I think all the weeks are very nice. Next week's going to be wonderful, too. Planning these 4 days have been nice. Monday through Thursday. We go live now, and it's such a more concentrated dose of Quite Frankly that I feel like the shows have gotten better just because of the limited supply right there. But it's not like it's really limited because it creates so much free space at the end of the week to do other stuff with. Tomorrow night, Quite Frankly might be off in a sense, but the Playhouse is live at 7 o'clock. And not only am I going to be live tomorrow at 7, but Anthony's going to be here co-hosting with me, and across the way I'm going to have both Tim and Kyle. I mean, we've only been together once in the same room since our band broke up in 2005. You know, so we're going to have so much reminiscing to do. I want to try to, listen to some of our old recordings. You know what the craziest thing about tomorrow is? From a production sense, I don't really have that much to do, but the one thing I do have to do is actually pretty challenging. I have to find a place to burn a CD. I don't think my brother even has a CD player in his studio anymore to be able to rip. I have our demo from 2004 or 5, whenever the hell we put it out, the last demo that we put together as a band, and I have to find a way to rip the CD. Burn, rip, whatever, like these terms we don't even do anymore. But that'll be great. Saturday night is going to be wonderful, and away we go. Tonight, on the other hand, I have been waiting a long time to talk to our guest tonight. A very long time. But it's one of those things where I knew she was out there, and we never really crossed paths. And then within the span of about a week and a half, maybe about, 3 or so weeks ago, a number of people from this audience were just like, hey, why don't you get Gigi Young on it? Have you ever spoke to Gigi Young? She's really interesting, all this stuff. I said, all right, well, when these things come in clusters, I have to go and check them out. And thankfully I did. So we have that going to be happening in a little while. And but on the second half of the show, we're going to be taking your calls. I want to take your calls because we haven't done that in a while. We can do that. We can rifle through some reels perhaps, but that's depending on how much time we actually have left. The third hour that we did last night on the flip side was incredible. And we watched some really we were talking about a lot of the viciousness that's going on and all the paid warring that is happening within so-called right-wing new media, which is not really new anymore. You know what I mean? It's not really new anymore, and so much of the same corporate interests have gotten into the small operations. So we were talking about that. It was really great. You'll go check it out. Also, remember, on Saturday night, I'm going to be giving this away. Everybody who sends a super chat, everybody who sends a super chat across YouTube, Rumble, Pilled, quite frankly, superchat.com, This is a big one, over $200 worth of bath and spa stuff that we were going to give away at the Jamboree, but we just didn't have room on any of the prize tables. So I said, don't worry, I'll start giving away on air as the weeks go on. They're wonderful gifts. People are going to love the stuff in here, and I have to add more stuff in, like this. Like this Flip City, Quite Frankly magazine. Oh, what a good time. There I am. First time I was ever animated for print publication. The last time, too, actually. So, yeah, I'm going to throw these in and whatever the hell else. All right, so let's just get into this, shall we? Now, over the last, I saw over the last couple of hours, there's a lot of people freaking out because the Mamdani guy has already started messaging completely differently than he was when he was on the campaign trail about what he wants to do and messaging about anti-Semitism and stuff. And that got all the anti-Semites very upset. Specifically the left-wing anti-Semites. You know, because everybody's anti-Semitic, but the left-wing ones that really wanted, like the actual Hamas members and that are out there hanging out in New York City with their flags and their masks. Good Lord, what's going on all around us right now? I loved when all that shit used to be an ocean away, but it was brought over here. Anywho, a lot of crazy things going on. And you see some people already got themselves all tied up in all these conflicting thoughts and feelings because this was supposed to be their revolution. And I've heard so many incredible interviews done. It's not like beating a dead horse because I find it like sociologically very important to just watch people in the same way that I would walk through the mouse house at the Bronx Zoo or the reptile den or something like that, or whatever the hell it is. You go to a zoo, you observe the animals, and you try to get like an idea of how they are in their natural habitat, even though they're not in a natural habitat. And to hear people talk so glowingly about Marxism, especially the 1917 revolution. I was talking about that last night, how apropos it is for all this terrible stuff to be going on and to be on display in New York City, given New York City's importance to the training and funding of the Bolsheviks, who went and murdered the Romanovs and so many tens of millions more in Russia and throughout Eastern Europe in the 20th century. And then, of course, that spread everywhere else. But to hear people go to talk about the Bolshevik Revolution as if it was anything other than an absolute slaughter, a slaughter of innocent people, is just incredible. And it really goes hand in hand with all the other very disturbing things we've seen out of people, especially in the last couple of months, especially since early September. And, you can certainly point to secular reasons. There are always secular reasons for why we are seeing what we're seeing in society today. You know, you can say, if you want to stay away from any of the what people would call woo-woo stuff, which I love the woo-woo, but if you want to stay away from any of that stuff and just stay secular, you say, well, poor education really works against people. Poor family structure really works against people over the long run, especially over generations. Pharmaceutical dependencies, which is absolutely, that's just like, it's just a part of our culture. The poor quality of food, water, our poor quality of sleep, grueling work schedules with diminishing returns. And then just it leads to, as well as it being its own mutually exclusive thing, but just extreme disharmony in society, fueled by the way we educate and the way that we entertain and the messaging that's baked into everything. It's contributing to widespread mental illness, and it's very hard to really maintain any kind of rational footing in where we are. And because of that being the case, there's just so much negativity. There's so much anguish, fear, trauma. There's so much of these brooding energies that are being broadcast. And, some people, we are also able to pick that up, those broadcasts, but there are other entities out there that take that, as Rudolf Steiner said, as welcome food. And I wonder to myself when we look at these little waves of of activity in American streets over the course of a few days or sometimes a week, whenever a rash pops up for us, I say, well, surely this is planned. Surely this is a laughably bad situation. It can't just be one big cacophony of mistakes that are never corrected. This has to be benefiting someone. But I also have to wonder what the real benefit is. Can it really just be all about money? Or is there something even more valuable being harvested here? Could it be more important? Is it a more important natural resource that is being stolen right now? Could that natural resource being human life force itself? Well, for that discussion, we are bringing on Gigi Young, gigiyoung.com. She's got a wonderful YouTube channel that's been linked in the description. Gigi is an author. She's an author known for her work on esoteric topics, psychic development, celestial origins, spiritual hierarchies, and how it all relates to us here on Earth. It's not separate from us, but sometimes and many times we don't consider it in our relationship to it. But she takes her audience on frequent dives into occult analysis on current events and the recognition of ritual patterns and messaging hidden in plain sight. Gigi, welcome finally to Quite Frankly.
Thank you so much for having me. Great intro.
Well, I try writing. It's a small part of the show, writing, but I try to do it up for our guests. So your journey is a wonderful one and a very intriguing one. And for many people who haven't heard about you, I'd love for you to start a little bit about your origin story, because it starts in the fashion industry. You were a model, right?
I was a model. I was a model for my younger years until I was probably about, I would say maybe 25 or so. And I was kind of aging out of it. And you can kind of keep going in that industry, go into acting, go into something in fashion, keep going, or you can do something else. And while I was traveling, I was often alone. You know, you're alone in these like model apartments, or you're just like kind of by yourself in these, like, you don't speak the language kind of thing. And so I would just meditate in my room. And I ended up having kind of an awakening experience. And I started to see spirits, which I did when I was young as well. But I didn't have a framework because my parents were atheist. And that was, you know, for weak people and things like that. So there was no paradigm for me to be spiritual or explore any spiritual abilities that I had. But then when I left home and I began traveling and was alone so much, and I had a meditation practice, it began to open up my spiritual sight. I began to see spirits, see angels, see dark entities as well, see auras. And that really set me on my journey to, I think, understand what that is. And of course, I fell in love with it, and I have never stopped. But that's sort of the beginning of that's my origin story, really.
You know, as you were talking about that, I did some interviews with Jerry Marzinski. Have you seen any of his stuff on the internet?
I don't recall.
Well, he's a former psychotherapist that worked with a lot of schizophrenic patients that were in institutions for the criminally insane, who have done committed really horrible crimes, and were dealing with psychotic episodes where they're hearing voices and seeing things. And yes, what you just said is reminding me somewhat of that, obviously, because you're not a dangerous person. But just to think about how far removed so many people are from any kind of, like you talking about your parents being atheist. Well, what happens when somebody comes from that worldview, which is becoming a lot more prevalent and has been an objective of many governments and many special interest groups to make sure that any kind of spiritual and religious life is burned out of younger generations of people for a while now? When you don't have that grounding, then, and you have some kind of a paranormal or supernatural experience, and there's no basis for why that could ever even be possible, I can imagine that the first thing to do is to think that you're broken, you need to go on drugs, and there's something wrong.
100%. And I think that's why I didn't open up when I was younger too much, is because any talk of that was like, you have a mental illness. The spiritual world does not exist. And if you see things, or if you hear things, or if you deviate from the materialist norm, you are a mentally ill person. That's what it is. What's interesting about that is that if we were a few thousand years earlier, say in the Native American cultures, or some of the earlier, maybe more uh, cultures closer to spirit and nature, they would say if somebody was breaking through like that and they were seeing things and they were hearing things, they may react differently. They may say, this is the shaman, and we need to prepare this person because they're seeing and hearing things that are not here. And they are feeling fear. And it's because they're feeling so much fear and out of control because their perception, like if you psychically awaken very quickly, you have no paradigm in order to understand what you're experiencing. And if you fall into fear, that's only going to compound the scary things that happen, because the more afraid you are, the more scary things you see. The more peaceful you are, the more grounded you are, the more higher things you see, unless there's some kind of intervention. So your state of consciousness, or your attunement, is everything to do with what you perceive. So people that come into this too fast, the more afraid they are, the more they're told that they're a paranoid schizophrenic, the worse things become. And so I do think that, there's a lot of mental disorders that are spiritual disorders, and there's no pill that you're going to take that's going to help that. And medicine needs to start to understand the spiritual world, because no matter how much of a materialist we want to be, we do have a spiritual body, and there is a spiritual world, and that's objectively true. So we need to understand how to operate that world.
Well, you get into a lot of psychic development topics on your show, in your writing, all of that stuff, and I know that we're moving our way through this, because you're talking about an awakening point here, but it traveled a lot further than that, and I'm so excited to walk this path to get to where you are today, as we sit right here on this first debut appearance on Quite Frankly. May there be many more to come. But I was when I was first turned on to your work, most people, I was saying to myself, most people who work with the materials that you do, the topics you do, they usually adopt a very pluralistic, new age world view on things, where it's all about self-divinity. It's all about Eastern mysticism, neo-pagan types of themes. It's very prevalent and all that. Is that, I know that's not where you are right now, and we'll get to that, but is that where it started for you? Is that a phase that you moved through?
Yes, very much so. There was no, there was no Christian mysticism at like Borders books or Chapters or the bookstores. It's all, I mean, you have a spiritual experience and you're like, what's that? And then it's just the New Age section. That's what it was for me. And so I was very much in the New Age. And the New Age basically is, I would say, theosophy boiled down and removed so many times that it doesn't really even represent the Eastern traditions anymore, or even theosophy, because paganism has its place. It has its place in history. It has its place in human development. And the Eastern traditions are a lead up to Christianity, and they have their place. And that's sort of how I see things. I don't see them as competing or inherently evil or anything like that. I think that they're part of the world, and they have their place and their meaning and their history. So I was very much in that New Age, the New Age stream, but over time, the experiences I have didn't really like match up with how the New Age was describing things eventually, and I also began to see Christian figures, and I just went down this, I got to a certain point where, the New Age just didn't make sense to me. It was causing disassociation. It seemed like for me, it was just causing like not embodiment, but more like out of body stuff. And then I got pulled more into, I would say, Christian mysticism eventually, because I began seeing basically men in white robes. I was like, I had this room that I would do meditation and yoga in. And then I would look through this window into the house and I would see these men walking around in white robes. I would see their feet. I would just see their feet walking by the window. And I was thinking, what is that? I know.
Wow.
I know. It was very strange. And then then eventually I began to have my own experiences with Christ and the sort of Christian figures that appear that way to you, actually, when you see them.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that this is a great place for the next turn then, because you talk a lot about Christ impulse.
Yes.
And then when we talk about new age materials, you always hear things, especially this one thing. It's called Christ consciousness, and I know just from knowing what I do about your work that you're talking about Jesus in particular, but Christ consciousness, by and large, is a phrase that is used in a lot of new age circles. That is again deceptively pluralizes Christ, the word, into a sort of title that anyone can claim for themselves, that they can take. What's your take on this? Because it's very deceptive, and that I've been long since suspicious of that term.
Yeah, I think that when I hear some people talk about it, I think that they're talking about the Holy Spirit, because that's sort of the essence of Christ, the essence of God that's within. So it's sort of like, I think that when some people from the New Age are talking about it and feeling and sensing Christ within, I think that they could be talking about Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, but they don't, because they're not coming from that structure of Sunday school and having that vernacular, they may not call it that. So I think some people mean Holy Spirit when they say it, but they don't. They're working their way into it. But then there's a real issue, especially in the New Age, with the whole Christ consciousness thing, where they completely misunderstand it and they profane it. So in the mysteries, when something is profaned, that means it's destroyed. It means it's not usable as a concept. And this happens all the time with Christ. So sometimes people will say, like Christ is just a consciousness. It's just an energy. And that Jesus never was a historical figure. He never lived. He never performed the resurrection. None of that is real. And so it's kind of like, also sometimes that can be a version of Gnosticism as well, is that, the Christ never lived. The Christ is just a symbol, just an energy. But what that actually does is it profanes the concept, because Jesus did live and Christ did live in Jesus, and Jesus did resurrect. And in that, gave everyone the ability to develop their immortal body or live eternally. So if you actually want to spiritually develop, you really can't do so without at some point acknowledging the Christ and acknowledging the deed that Christ did. So there's a whole stopping point where you either split off and you understand that, or you make yourself God, as you're saying.
Yeah.
So if Christ just remains an energy and a consciousness, then you're God with a Christ consciousness sort of thing. So it's sort of like we're at a point in culture where we can make ourselves God through these weird kind of, what is really kind of more of a pagan concept. Before God incarnated in man, we couldn't understand it, right? So we would think in terms like that. So it's kind of a pagan way of thinking, really, to think of it as a consciousness, as a symbol. That's kind of more of an earlier human analysis of things. But once God incarnates in man, we have to see God in ourselves, and it changes our consciousness entirely, right? And so we're at this point where it's like we have to go inward and understand what the resurrection is actually. And I believe that it's important in mysticism as well.
And you're talking about you personally too, you are talking about a physical resurrection. That's not a symbolic one either.
Correct. And this is the danger with things like Christ consciousness, is it removes that. And what the and there's a deeper there's something that's I call initiation science, but is also prevalent in Rudolf Steiner's work, who's another Christian mystic, where we have to understand how you actually become eternal. How do you actually become immortal? Not just a story, not just something that is we think about sometimes, but how does it actually happen? And that's the point of all of our life, by the way, is to one day become immortal. And how that happens is that the Christ, which is within every single person, actually glorifies your body. So glorifies your astral body, your etheric body, and then eventually, and this is where we get to the physical resurrection, eventually when you become a very high master like Jesus, you actually glorify your physical body and make it a spiritual body. Now that is called the resurrection body. It's called the immortal body, and it's even talked about in earlier traditions. It's even talked about in Tibetan mysticism and Eastern mysticism, because of course they were preparing for the incarnation of God and man. So they knew about this, they knew he was coming and everything like that, really. So we have to understand that there's a very specific process of glorification of the human being through Christ. And that when he rose, when he was resurrected, that's actually talking about a very specific process that we can all do through him. So that's why it's so important to understand is that we don't understand our own immortality, our own process of evolution, unless we understand what he did exactly. So if you don't acknowledge Christ, you don't acknowledge your own spiritualization basically out of matter. Does that make sense?
It does. But it's
Okay.
of course the first time that I'm having this conversation, so I'm taking a lot in, but it does
Sorry.
the way that this is why I love this kind of stuff, and I it makes me really wonder about the rest of this though too, because I know that when it comes to psychic development, and you talk about the ability for a person to live their life consciously striving toward immortality and walking in the path of God. There's the big question about the do's and don'ts while we are here on Earth, things that can screw us up and bounce us off track, or just have our chances at that immortality destroyed, where we go and we find ourselves in a much different predicament there. And when it comes to psychic development in particular, I get a lot of this often when we discuss this stuff. Whenever we have a night where we talk about OBEs or whatever the hell else it is, many people automatically equate psychic ability with witchcraft or some form of dark arts. And I always tend to lean into the belief that if it is part of who we are, then it's not because God made a mistake in creating us that way. It's just like, driving a car or handling a firearm, navigating a big city, as you were saying before. You just need to be morally grounded, well protected, know what you're doing, know where the bad parts of town are. So I wonder how you can bring us into those psychic realms now that are they're always hotly debated about whether or not they exist or whether they should ever be accessed by anybody who calls themselves a Christian, for example.
Yeah, well, they exist. They objectively exist. Obviously, in Christianity, there's the spiritual hierarchies, which are the angels. They appear throughout the biblical text. Now, when the Bible was written, there was an assumed knowledge of angels. So they don't talk about there's angels and archangels and archai and kind of the Pauline system of angels. They just talk about them like, oh yes, Gabriel was at the Annunciation of Mary, and they name out all the angels because people already knew what they were thousands of years ago. Now we've forgotten what they are. But this is a new thing, this kind of materialism that we're suffering from today, which is actually the result of all the darkness that you're talking about, like the collectivism and the all the dark stuff that we were talking about in the beginning. All of that is due to materialism, and in a large part in the lack of spirit. So we have to come back to understanding that you have a soul, you have a spirit, and not only that, the spiritual world objectively exists. And that is, it's our duty in this time to understand the spiritual world just as we would understand the natural world. So just like you can understand, every phylum of bumblebee and every type of tree, we need to understand the spiritual world in that kind of detail. And that actually brings forward a process of us knowing ourselves, because every spiritual thing is an internal thing, right? So anyone who says, that claims to be spiritual or religious that then denies the spiritual world is in kind of a conundrum, because in order to be spiritual, you have to acknowledge the spiritual world, and that's also the difference between dogmatism and real spirituality, right? And this is another crisis that we're in too, is there's a difference between being dogmatic and mechanical with something and actually having the living Christ within you and a living spirit, and being and engaging with it and thinking about things and challenging yourself and getting to the real spiritual core truth, the objective truth of something.
As you're saying this, it makes me think about the societal issues we have right now, even just sociopolitically. And that is, when I think about the people in my life who do the very cliched, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. We get that shit a lot. And the reason why I believe we get that shit a lot is because we've been educated out of any kind of traditional faith that built society for us, that built the West. That has been beaten out of home life. It's been beaten out of schools. It's been beaten out of community life, and because that was a way that we took care of the poor. There's a way that we took care of. It wasn't just about getting onto a faceless, loveless, gratitudeless welfare system. We were duty bound to each other through higher devotions and duties, and I think that right now, you see that too with the way that people vote. They vote and they want things out of government that really give them an excuse to have really no responsibility, but a lot of comfort. And with the people that I know who always give me the "I'm not religious, but I am spiritual" line, it is usually because I know them. It is usually because they want a very comfortable way of creating their own little new age religion that sanctifies everything that makes them feel cozy and makes everything that they are uncomfortable with a sin or fascist or whatever the hell it is. And it's like a constant relinquishing of responsibility. They don't want the responsibility that perhaps comes with following a creator, a redeemer that in his own way follows the rules of creation as well. That's just it. People don't like the rigidity of the idea of walking in God's footsteps, and it's hard. Even the people who are trying to do it are failing every day. But some people they really rest on that whole spiritual, not religious thing as a crutch, so that they always feel good about their choices.
Yeah, well, what I can say is that a lot of people will come into spirituality from a place of deep wounding. So they'll come into spiritual life because they're suffering incredibly and they just want relief. They just want to feel better. They just want something. They just want comfort. And so there's a large portion of people who are spiritual, not to, like we were saying earlier, objectively understand the spiritual world, or, quite frankly, be destroyed by God's love, which is what happens when you really deeply connect with God. Is usually God turns the light on and says, listen, what you're doing here is hurting you and it's hurting other people. A lot of spiritual awakening is ego death. It is actually looking at your life and realizing that you're not living morally, or you're doing something that is from a lower urge. You're actually doing something that's hurting yourself. In the Eastern tradition, you'd call that kama manas, the desire body. You're living from desire. You're not living from your higher self, or God. You're living from desire. So a lot of people come into spirituality because they are suffering. And they then use spiritual concepts as a way to try to get a sense of control over life and try to begin to heal. But eventually, spirituality has to become something more than a vacation or a lullaby or whatever you want it to be or need it to be to feel better. It has to become what it truly is, which actually can be something very difficult some days, very beautiful other days, but it definitely involves the renunciation of your ego, of your lower ego to God, for sure. I mean, the first thing, and this is across any tradition, you can go east, you can go west. Okay. The first thing that an adept would do, or like an initiate would do if they wanted to be spiritual, right, was they'd have to give up the material life. They'd have to fast, meaning you give up your comfort, actually. You have to be celibate. You have to do all these things that are renouncing material life, actually. But in the New Age, we see something very different. We see people actually wanting to, use spirituality to manifest money, to manifest, this or that. And the spiritual world really shouldn't be used to get things materially, actually. If you want to be spiritual and truly spiritual, you actually have to renounce the material world and say, this doesn't control me. And you have to unite your will with God's will, which is not a pleasant thing to do, because then you have to look within yourself and see where you're lying to yourself. You may have to atone and apologize to people that you were a jerk to. And so real spirituality hurts, actually, but you are so much better for it. And that is how you become truly radiant, is that you're willing to do that. So real spirituality is renunciation of the material world. Actually, it doesn't control you anymore. You don't seek the comfort. Comfort is in God. That's where comfort is. That's where comfort will only ever be. Anything else is an illusion. That's it. That's the path, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Damn.
And that's redemption. So
you put things into such great, nice packages, and that makes a hell of a lot of sense. It's made a lot of sense for things that I guess I haven't been able to articulate for myself. But your works over those years since your meditations in what you said it was. Well, did I read it was in Japan when you had your that meditation that really started things? Okay, so
it was, yeah.
So since that day where everything kicked off and you were on this journey, what, as far as your work as a medium, what kind of skills have you developed or honed for yourself? And you said you were seeing ethereal bodies. You're seeing angels. It could be light, dark, auras, whatever the hell it is. I have friends who can see auras as well, and I have friends who have involuntary out-of-body experiences that they never learned how to control, so they turn to one substance or another to kind of keep them knocked out for the night when they go to sleep. And there are things that go on around and people have, because of maybe lack or an abundance of guidance, they're able to hone something, or they just got to deal with it. So what skills have you honed and developed over the years since you've brought your attention to this part of reality?
Yeah, well, it's completely natural, like you're saying. It's completely natural to see the spiritual world because it objectively exists and surrounds us. And it's not that it's somewhere else, by the way. It's that it's right here. Heaven is right here. The dark side is right here. It's just a different quality, not a different frequency. That's dangerous. That's a dangerous way to think. It's not vibrating faster. It's a different quality entirely. So, it's natural that you would eventually see that as you spiritually develop, and it's not evil or anything like that. Every religion was based in great mystics. But I would say that I've never thought about them as like specific powers. I feel like for me, I tend to work in information a lot. So I get like almost like downloads of information. and then it'll come in sort of like from behind, like I'll get a bunch of visions. And then sometimes I'll get sounds. But this, for whatever reason, the sounds kind of unnerve me a little bit. It's like everybody has their thing. The sounds are a little spooky for me, but I do get sounds. And then I see a lot. I see a lot, and I've had to learn to, place myself in my body in a certain way, so I'm not always like seeing things all the time, because I live I live like isolated in a kind of ascetic way. So it's a little easy to live in my little psychic world.
Yeah. Well, I have to imagine that there are things that really don't require too much practice, but just a little bit more understanding, and it becomes easier. Yeah, a little bit more trust there too. And I've that's something that has been told to me quite a bit. In fact, I think I mentioned it last week or the week before about whenever I have the self-control to actually sit down and be quiet and have absolutely nothing going on. Like, let's say it's a summer afternoon and I finish writing for the show a little bit sooner, and there's really just a space of time where I can just be on the back porch and there's nothing happening. Around that 30-minute mark of nothing but silence is when there usually is a flood of answers for questions, ideas, when there was writer's block, all types of things. I don't know what it is. Before we move on I want to ask you specifically about spiritual hierarchies, but before we get there, what can you say about any kind of methodology to open up those gateways for data? Is that something, is there something, a universal practice anybody can do to just chill out and just let ideas and data flow?
Yeah, well, a huge part of it is relaxation. So if the body and mind are not relaxed, then you may not hear or sense or get any spiritual information, because spirit is sort of, it's extra. It's more information, right? It's not unnatural, it's just more. And if you're already stressed, if you're thinking about the grocery list and this person that flipped you off in the car and what you've got to do, and you're not fully present and you're not in your body and your body isn't relaxed, then your body's going to say, you're not getting any more information because you're not handling everything in your life, well, because you're stressed. So if you're stressed all the time and your nervous system is vibrating, then your body's kind of more in fight or flight, and it's not going to allow in higher information from spirit consciously, like you're talking about, but it'll come in dreams, or it'll come when you're walking or maybe doing an activity with your hands and you're relaxed. But you do have to be centered. And if you want to do it, you can just say a prayer and ask for that. And the main thing that people do, that also can mess them up, is that they think that when they have a thought in their mind, that it's them. But your angel, and everybody has a guardian angel, everybody has an angel that's part of their life that helps them. Your angel actually sounds like your voice. It sounds like your own thought. So many people are actually getting direct intuition from their angel, just like a medium would, but it's just they think that it's their own voice. And the difference here is that someone who's a medium has just invested more in listening to the voice, carrying out the acts that the voice is saying you need to do, how to live your heart, all that kind of stuff. And then if you don't listen to it, it doesn't get louder. So everybody has it, but people don't realize that what feels like their own thought, what feels like their own feeling, can be the Holy Spirit, and it can be their angel. And so just being willing to do what your angel tells you to do, if you have to, change your diet or whatever it may be, just the more you follow it, the louder it gets.
Yeah. Talking about a little bit about those, now that you bring up angels and guardian angels and the Holy Spirit. What have you learned about the hierarchy of those celestial beings? I'd love to know just about the rankings of them all before we move into another big topic, which is your thoughts on Antichrist. So, as far as hierarchies, what should people know, do you think?
Yeah, the best resource on the spiritual hierarchies that I found is the anthroposophical system. And so this is a Christian mystic. Rudolf Steiner talked about the spiritual hierarchies in detail. He's a fantastic teacher on this. And so there's basically, three different worlds, roughly. There's the supernatural world, which is the world of the angels. And there are basically hierarchies of angels that are in different orders of life. And then there is the natural world, which is where we operate. So there's the supernatural world of the angels. And then there's the natural world. That's where we operate. That's where physicality is, materiality is. And then there's like the underworld or the subatomic world or the subnatural world or the underworld. Okay, lots of different words we can use for that. And so that's kind of like how the cosmos really should be viewed. Not like there's 50 different dimensions and whatever. No, we have to look at the cosmos as it is experienced and lived as a human being, not a disembodied abstract concept, not a hologram, not a simulation, but that is actually what it is experientially as a mirror of the human being and God. So that is the hierarchy. Those are like the three basic classical levels of existence. The supernatural world of the angels, in which there are basically 9 choirs or 9 different levels above us, hierarchies of 3. And man is really on his way to becoming an angel. We'll be the 10th according to the anthroposophical system, actually. So we will be as him, we will evolve to that level to do the things that he does, that sort of thing. And then the underworld is really interesting. It is where the fallen angels exist. It's where you will find the demonic entities, but also just elemental beings that are not, they're not evil, but they just carry out the process of entropy and decay. Yeah.
Like maggots. They're just maggots.
Yeah, they're just maggots. They're not evil. They don't look very good to see. So the underworld is kind of that scary shadow world. That's where the lower entities come from. Sometimes in the New Age, it's referred to as the lower astral plane. It's associated with the moon, actually. Oftentimes, the moon is kind of the gate that separates that world from ours. So there's lots of different ways into that, but that's the basic structure. The supernatural world of angels, the human world is the natural world, and the human being is the being of the natural world, of the material world. And then there is the subnatural world, which is basically decay and entropy.
Yeah,
and how it is. The underworld.
Well, that's the other thing. You see the world of the angels, and then us. You think that each place has its premier being, and
You're
of course,
right.
you have God, you have man, all of us, and our folly and our foibles over here, and then below you ask anybody who's the head honcho in the underworld, and you say it's probably Satan, it's probably Lucifer, whatever name we're going to, whatever you want, and of course the catch-all for that is Antichrist. It is just the opposite, the undercutting force that would be in direct opposition to the Creator, the Redeemer. So, I mean, with that in particular, I mean, we talk a lot about, and I opened up actually referencing Rudolf Steiner. I didn't even really, it took me until like we've had Ilana Freeland on this show many times to talk.
Aww.
Yeah, she's the best, and she is so big on Rudolf Steiner, and it wasn't until like a later conversation we had with Ilana that she actually said no, Rudolf Steiner was a Christian, because you read so much, and I just tend to think that he was like one of those on the cutting edge of frontier of like a a sort of a new age theosophist kind of a thing going on there. She says no. And I started looking into this a little bit more. I brought it up in the opening, but we hear, especially from him, a lot about those malevolent spiritual forces who gain access to us through trauma, through things like trauma. And if you think about what happened, I mean, no century is without its traumas, but just from the 20th century on, 2 world wars, terrorism, antagonism through traditional forms of media. I mean, just what was the havoc that was wreaked through television and through radio and through print, that did the trick in and of itself. But you know, Gigi, when we think about the last 20 years that we've been able to broadcast and receive all types of personalized messages through social media, you know, I just wonder what you think about that, because I don't know. Are you on the same page as people who say that perhaps the Antichrist isn't going to be a person, but more of a cybernetic abomination like a Skynet, and whether or not there's a spiritual component to that as well?
Yes, well, it's great that we're talking about Steiner, because I think that Rudolf Steiner really brings forward a cohesive cosmology to understand Antichrist, to understand the spiritual hierarchies. And he has a really kind of fascinating view of evil. He doesn't really break it up into a duality like most systems do. He actually has Christ at the center, and then he has 2 different kinds of destabilizing forces. Now, one is kind of an evil, more traditional Satan figure, which is Ahriman. So that's Ahriman. Now, that is the Persian word for devil, but it's also parallel to Mammon. So this is the devil of materialism, which draws humanity deeper and deeper into matter. Okay, and then there's another kind of evil that humanity has to deal with, another destabilizing force, which is Lucifer. But Lucifer is viewed a little bit different. Lucifer is the spiritualizing evil. So if you think about the New Age, as we're talking about it, how it makes you so disembodied, a lot of sexual proclivities, they each have a different effect on the human being. The harmonic impulse, if you will, who it has an effect, and then also the Luciferic impulse does. Now, this is an entity, though. So it's not just an impulse, it's an entity. So Lucifer is a fallen angel. He's an entity. So is Ahriman. So we're dealing with classes of fallen angels that have an effect on humanity. But because they're not in our plane, they're not in the natural world, we experience it as more of an impulse. We experience it as kind of an impulse and influence, but they're actually real beings. So when it comes to Antichrist, that's more of like a reference to Sorat, or it's more of like, we'll put it this way, the Antichrist is a real entity. Just like Christ is a second person in the Trinity and is a real entity, objectively real being, right? The Antichrist is a real being. It's a real entity. But there's also something that's called the spirit of Antichrist, which is that you can have different people who quite literally embody Antichrist. So like Ahriman, the entity, embodies the Antichrist spirit very closely. You know, just like how Jesus bore the Christ, according to Steiner's cosmology, Ahriman will also come to be, who's like an Antichrist figure because he has the Antichrist spirit.
And that will be a human being eventually, you say. You mean
I mean, there's lots of different. Steiner doesn't really describe it, but yeah, it's going to be an incarnation, a human being, but it could be, there could be transhumanism, and we're not sure exactly what it will look like, but we do have sort of this more direct expression of Antichrist spirit, which is in Ahriman. It's not like the Antichrist like Christ, but it's the spirit of Antichrist that possesses people to greater and lesser degrees. So when it comes to Antichrist, if you have something like the Skynet, you know, that is a very harmonic thing using Steiner's cosmology, because when you have all these technologies beaming down like radiation and electricity, that's changing the etheric body of the earth. It's changing it's changing our energy bodies. So it's actually a very satanic thing if you're coming from a place of like, we are also energy. And, the earth also is a spiritual being. So there's no need to encase her in Skynet and the Kardashev scale, where you have to surround the sun with like Dyson spheres and all this weird technology we suddenly have to survive. This is very much Antichrist, which Elena Freeland just delivers beautifully as well. This is really an example of Antichrist spirit in the world from the perspective of, I would say, many Christian mystics. And especially when you start getting into this idea that somehow technology is going to provide eternal life. Well, that's impossible. It's literally impossible. So we see with technology, it's promising all of these spiritual things, eternal life, clairvoyance, downloads, like you were saying, like the Neuralink, but that's all spiritual. These are all things that happen spiritually, and technology is promising us that.
Yeah, and that brings up another great point, and that is, you're talking about what's impossible about immortality being provided by any kind of technology. Well, I also think that it's, AI, even though it's a term that is used among everybody just to make things easier about really advanced computing technology, it's also impossible to call it intelligent and sentient in the way that a human being is, no matter how powerful the computer's computing powers can be, or image generation powers, or how it could almost be predictive in some kind of a way. But I get, that's why I wonder, because I'm not getting into the whole sentient robot question and ever giving it any real consideration, but I do wonder about the whole idea of creating conduits and sock puppets for something that is in one way or another intelligent, if not just disembodied. Like, for example, what if there's a spiritual component to that Skynet? Because with AI, impossible to be intelligent. I get why people say, hey, there's nothing magical about AI. It's advanced computing, but it's still programmed by a man. So its parameters are being put forth by man. But still, I've covered stories about everything from possessed people to haunted objects. And so I have to imagine that it must be possible that we're eventually going to be dealing with, if not already, a situation where machines are politically biased, yes, but also act as spiritual conduits as well.
Oh, yes. So actually, there's a huge tradition of there's a huge tradition of animating. In occultism, it's sometimes called animating an object. It's also sometimes called sympathetic magic. So yeah, you can 100% create a thing like a large language model, like a computer, like a, AI device, a robot. And then using classical pagan magic, you can animate it. Now there's animation spells that I found going down to the Egypto-Chaldean period where, again, they work through sympathetic magic. So you can actually summon an entity into a machine. So it's not that like one day you're talking to ChatGPT and suddenly it just becomes conscious because it's existed for long enough or something, or it's talked to enough people. Although there is kind of the sympathetic connection that you can have with the elemental in that machine, which is another thing we can talk about at another time maybe. But yeah, ultimately it's a husk, it's a shell. And this is in Kabbalah actually as the golem. So a computer, a robot could be a golem, which is something that can be enchanted. It's something that through sympathetic magic, you can actually pull a spirit into over time. So this is, they used to do this actually with statues. So in the Egyptian tradition, they used to actually have statuary that they believed would contain the essence of their pharaoh or a priest.
Yeah.
And they would talk to the statue, and the statue would talk back. That's what a lot of those statues represent, is they're actually full of entities. During the pagan period, this was very popular. They would charm crystals, actually. And what are computers full of? They're full of crystals, right? They're full of quartz. So crystals are fantastic things that are magical things that you can use to hold energy and to charm or summon an entity into. Also, we're dealing with kind of a perfect storm here, because we have electricity, magnetism, and then we also have even people talking about radiation, so nuclear activity sometimes in these different devices. Well, that's also incredibly occult. So when you have huge amounts of electricity, huge amounts of magnetism, and even something like radiation and all these, like, home power devices you hear about, like free energy devices, these are occult items. It's only a materialist that's going to look at a robot or a computer with like crystals in it and electricity and magnetism and be like, oh, that's just a computer, like it's turning on a light switch or something. When you use huge, especially large amounts of electricity, large amounts of magnetism, and especially if you include any kind of radiation and any kind of radioactive effect, that is an occult phenomenon. Even if you don't have the radioactivity and you just have huge amounts of electricity and huge amounts of magnetism, that is a kind of scientific magic. It's a kind of magical practice.
I have to imagine you have a lot of interesting things to say about the construction of the pyramids and other Western Hemisphere ziggurats and everything else. I've read so many really intriguing blog posts and little things, articles, and analyzing the footprint, the floor plan of some of these ancient cities and temples that actually that in very eerie ways represents and can almost mimic the way that circuit boards are created for electronic and computing devices, that perhaps so many ancient cities that everybody has a theory about how they actually really were functioning in their heyday were generating some kind of an energy. It's something that it's so much more advanced than we can ever think of. Of course, the big thing that counterbalances that is, okay, well, you essentially had it. Your entire city was a functioning computer, a cosmic, communication tool. What the hell happened to you? You got conquered by the barbarians next door, and you didn't have any lasers to fend them off. What the hell happened? I understand, but it is something else. There's tons of theories about what the real function of the pyramids were, whether or not they were communication devices or star charting, or if it actually was temples and contained rooms for people to transition into new realms. If that's where they knew they were going to die, they wanted to die in one of these acoustically precise rooms and all that. I have to imagine you've done a lot of that in your time.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you, and I think that these are what you're talking about reminds me a lot of Edgar Cayce. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah.
Yeah. He talks about how during the Atlantean period, which really ended about 11,000, 12,000 years ago, the Atlantean continent sinks. And you get these migrations of what was really the Atlanteans to all of these different places in the world. So you get them in the Yucatan, in the Mayan tradition. You get them in Egypt, and they build the pyramids. You get them in Ireland. And of course, you get the great Indian civilization, which is the highest civilization after the Atlantean civilization. And so all of these cultures that have these megaliths are Atlantean legacy cultures. They are from the time just after Atlantis, or even maybe even during the end of Atlantis, when we had this more advanced technology. And it's funny that we're talking about the AI and all this spiritual technology and stuff like that, because that's actually how the Atlanteans operated. And they had a giant crystal, according to Edgar Cayce, and many other mystics as well have seen similar things. And there was this sort of almost like power grid that was shared through these different locations through like a crystalline grid. And so when you talked about how when you were looking down at, Egypt or these different cities, it kind of looked like there were channels for energy. Well, that would really support what Edgar Cayce talked about during his life and his Atlantis readings, which basically describe the Earth being used through crystalline technology as kind of having this free energy. And then the megaliths are, of course, they're not built by aliens, as ancient aliens would like us to say, but they're really built by humanity when we were in this earlier time period, and we have just completely no knowledge of it anymore. And sort of that's how I view those older civilizations. But 100%, I think that we're looking at temples.
Yeah.
When we see the pyramid, we're looking at temples. We're looking at a earlier time in human history where spirituality was much more integrated into daily life. We had more spiritual technologies. We had a deeper relationship with the earth. All the temples seem to be, lined up to stars, to different constellations. Even before we could even see them, they're lined up like that. So they're obviously channeling the energy of stars. So
it's a lot, and trust me, I am exerting a lot of self-control right now not to start talking about the alien, the UFO phenomena. We'll do that for another night. I don't want to go crazy, but you did mention something before. You're talking about magic, and part of that, especially when we just loop ritual back into it, at least one more big thing I wanted to discuss with you was the kind of sacrificial ritualistic behavior that we see going on in society right now, and what it, what you take away from it, how it makes you feel, and our prospects going forward. Of course, we can get to that. In particular, the Charlie Kirk assassination. Now, I might just reread it when we get off the phone and I have a little bit of time to take calls with people afterwards. I might just reread your thoughts on martyrdom afterwards. But if you have anything that you want to throw out there about just the metaphysical, how that all works on a metaphysical level, because we know politically earthbound reasons for eliminating someone that you feel to be a threat for any reason, but that ethereal butterfly effect, as you have come to understand it, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that up front, because then I want to talk about the actual blood sacrifice that we all went through, and the trauma that came from that. So can you talk about that martyrdom and how it applies to us over here?
Yeah, so a martyr is often used a lot in religious paraphernalia, or talking about, these different great figures that died for something higher than themselves. But there's actually a spiritual scientific explanation of what a martyr is. There's actually an occult science behind it. And occult is not a bad word, it just means hidden. So occult science, spiritual science here is just trying to exactly describe what goes on in the spiritual world. Especially, it's useful, especially upon death. So a martyr is essentially somebody who dies in a very specific way, is usually murdered or killed. And then what ends up happening, especially if it is public and widely viewed, that makes it even more intense magically. So when they pass away, what ends up happening is that because their life was taken, if they're young especially, part of their etheric body has an incredible amount of life force in it. So your etheric body is like your battery. It's your life force, or in the East, they'd say it's full of your prana. So it's full of your life. And when you take a life here, you have a certain amount of, basically, you could say, etheric life. It's like a battery. So when you pass early, especially in a horrific way, and especially if you're doing something that you believe to be true, it doesn't matter if you're not as advanced as someone else, or what somebody thinks of you, or politics. It means that you have to believe in what you're doing, right? Nobody is perfect. There's not one perfect person out there. And really no martyr has ever been perfect except for maybe Jesus, right? So it's not about the person having perfect ideas that you agree with or saying something perfect all the time. It's that this person believed and was dedicated to something higher than themselves to the best of their ability at the time, or at least to a decent degree, right? Which isn't for anyone to say, it's for God to say, right? So whenever you see a public execution or you see a huge situation like that, you always have to think, is this a martyr situation, right? You have to think of that. So what happens is that etheric body is still full of life. And what can happen is that an angel can then enter into that etheric body and into this world through that gate of death and through that etheric body. And they can actually affect change in the world through that opening of the death and then the etheric body. They wouldn't be able to affect it as well if there wasn't that earthly, living, human etheric body. They'd be outside a little bit more. So actually, when people are martyred, and this is where the Christian tradition really shines, as they really understand, the Christians really understand the idea of life after death and the idea that it goes on. And so there's a difference, though, between a saint and a martyr that I want to mention as well, because I did notice that when I wrote that, people were thinking that, they're the same thing. They're actually not necessarily the same thing. So a saint classically is sort of equivalent to, like in the East, you'd say a bodhisattva or a Buddha, or like in the New Age or in like, esotericism, you'd say a master. So that is somebody who actually has a portion of their etheric body and their spiritual bodies glorified. So that's actually an advanced individual. So a saint is an advanced individual that has reached a high level of adeptship. So when we were talking earlier about building your immortal body, these are individuals who are at an advanced stage of that. That's a saint. So you can be martyred as a saint, which means that you're actually a holy person. And there's many examples in Catholicism and even in other traditions of people who are martyred saints. But then there's also martyrs, which is just someone who also passes away, and then their etheric body is used by an angel or a solar angel, a Michaelic angel. And that person is not necessarily a saint, but their etheric body can still be used. Does that make sense?
It does, and it says right here, like what you wrote that really made me go, wait, hold on, what? I've got to get her on the show. We got to get on the show. You said, thus, with the death can come a certain kind of spiritual life on earth. Roses may take bloom. This is an unusual mystery and one that is borne out fully and to its highest degree in Christianity. This is why Christians glorify martyrs. It is not because we are some pathetic, depressed spiritual group, but rather because we understand that with death comes life, and only through the act of sacrifice can true love be known. And that if someone gives their life for something greater than themselves, they are sure to produce miracles on earth. That's after they're gone. It is spiritual law. And then you conclude by saying, if the dark side knew this, they would never shed blood. They would never kill. Instead, they would remain silent. Ironically, it is their evil activity that draws in the highest angels that produces their own exposure and failure. But on that, I got to ask you, because obviously this is all we're talking about perception of human beings on earth, our perception right here. Our understanding is limited. Our time, our frame of reference is limited. A couple of months from September 10th to now versus however many millennia, and God knows how long beyond that. It's all relative, but we see so little of it. And when I think about this, first of all, when I think about what's going on in the in the society, I really do see so much turmoil here. First of all, how this all trickles down to us since the death, for example, of Charlie Kirk. There's been a lively investigation of what's been, that's been sparked among people on the internet who are smart as hell, but they lack judicial authority or anything else like that. And elsewhere, the case has predictably been closed. The perp has been named. Everybody's like, this is all you're going to get from the authorities. TPUSA is under new management. Everybody wonders, how compromised that management is and where it's going to go, what service, what's a purpose it's going to serve in the future. And then the outrage that people felt at first is starting to kind of fade into a queasy form of acceptance of our position, as happens to us from time to time. We get these terrible things that we have to live through, whether it's an illegitimate election or some other kind of thing that happened to us or another from 2020 to about 2022. And we always hope that there's going to be some kind of earthly justice served. And then that queasy form of acceptance just kind of starts, forming in our bellies again. But there's something else here too. And I'm sure you saw it. And it is the blood sacrifice value of the whole thing that we lived through. And that's in the days that followed the murder, I just noted from a ritualistic standpoint, I haven't seen such a bone-chilling display of enthusiasm and excitement born from the spilling of innocent blood in my life. And I mean, the crazy thing is that the sacrifice itself didn't even seem to satisfy people. It merely riled them up. It was almost like watching cats rub their faces in catnip. They were just like, more. They turned it into Halloween costumes, and they got blood all over themselves. And it's like, I'm like, damn. So I understand why people like yourself lay down such cutting commentary about how significant portions of our society really does in fact act and operate much like a death cult. But what do you think about that whole process of waiting for justice that never comes?
It's up to us. How many assassinations are we going to watch? We saw JFK. Okay, I don't think we had the internet and we didn't have the ability to address it. I mean, most people that tried were murdered too. Then you have RFK Jr., who's also killed. You have MLK. You have other lesser things. There's obviously assassinations going on at very pivotal times that seem to collapse the country and drive it into different directions. And that's my opinion. I think that when you look back at history, and I talk about this on my series Occulted, and I've been doing these episodes on the Kirk assassination to really look at and ask the really tough questions like, listen, I know we want to go back asleep because I know this is really, really hard. But did we witness a blood sacrifice? Is that what we saw? And before anybody says, well, no, that stuff doesn't exist, then I would challenge you and say, when has it not existed? Tell me when this death cult and blood sacrifice has not existed on the earth. It is actually the norm. It was actually the norm for most of humanity for thousands of years, going back to pretty much every continent, maybe excluding like a couple rogue cultures that are small. This actually is how people acted for a very long period of time. And it's actually kind of ridiculous to think that it's not still going on. And this is a very tough question. It's a very tough thing to face because we don't feel like we can. But I promise that if we do ask the question, if we all ask it together, that we can handle it. There are enough people in this world to confront this from every single discipline, whether it be from politics, whether it be from mysticism, whether it be from the medical angle. If we can come together and we can honestly just have justice and just keep asking questions, with everyone should be able to ask questions, right? So yes, there is a death cult. There always has been a death cult, and a huge portion of our life as humanity has actually been trying to overcome that impulse. Human sacrifice was part of the Canaanites. It was part of, I talk about, the Druids like throwing people in the Wicker Man. So it's going to rain so you can win a war. The Hawaiians or the, different cultures would just toss a virgin in a volcano and just hope for the best. I mean, this is how Black magicians operate, actually. This is how it is. And we don't want to think about that. But it's a real form of magic. It can affect consciousness. And I would argue as well that assassination is a kind of occult ritual. Actually, it's a power ritual. It's what you do to generate social instability and gain control of a population. It is a kind of occultism, actually, to murder, to kill, to assassinate. And I think that's, you don't have to believe that, but I don't think it's wise for us at this point in time, with the country as divided as it is, as radicalized as it's becoming. I think that's where we have to go if we want to get things back on track.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion, but
no, and it's a good one. I mean, and as you were talking, I'm thinking about the other things that we see so often. I mean, humiliation rituals. Yeah. I mean, there's something you can do a whole show on humiliation ritual. People often wondered, man, so many of the things that we see every day in the news and otherwise, it makes so little sense. It has to just be about taunting and humiliation and trying to make sure that morale never gets above a whisper, because it's just nuts. Okay, so then in closing here, as we put a bow on our first hangout together, when we consider the types of forces in the world that would put together a ritual like that, a sacrifice like that, when we think about transhumanism and all the other things that are going against us, as we continue to awaken to our real relationship to the cosmos and, of course, God, and what our purpose is and how much more we can make of ourselves in service of Him, what would you say, aside from stoicism, prayer, are other ways that we win the fight on an individual basis and as a community?
Doing this. I think that what you're doing is fantastic. Have the conversations, talk about it, support people who do. I think actually speaking is, and not letting it go is really important. Just speaking the truth is like the first step. And I think that we do need to, because we're talking about transhumanism and everything, I do think we need to have a lot more conversations and quality discussions about legislating that properly. I think there's a lot of risks with the way that AI is going. I'm not against AI, but I am against AI being used in certain ways and becoming this all-consuming, all-controlling thing. I think we need to watch how I think that needs to be legislated properly and approached in a way that actually allows people to live instead of devouring us. I think that's very important. And I do think that we are at a turning point. I feel like I have never seen the division that's happened after the Kirk assassination, but I also feel a kind of fire in people. And I do think that it may take time, but I do think that we can learn from this. And I think that we can go in a positive direction with this. And sometimes it takes it to get really dark before we begin to go inward and sort of face, because you're talking about earlier about, how New York's politics is, kind of becoming more extreme. I do think that the country will sort of start to bifurcate into two different directions as well. I do see that as sort of like an inevitability moving forward. And so I do think we can moderate that a little bit, but I do think that there is going to be somewhat of a splitting of cultures towards sort of a more transhuman direction, and then a more freedom direction, or a more communal collectivist transhuman sort of thing, 15-minute cities. And then other parts of the country will probably become, more freedom oriented, more natural. I do see that as a natural part of it, and all the ugly stuff is sort of just us realizing that maybe we can't all get along.
No,
and we
you're right.
like it's just a sort of like different directions. I'm not saying the country has to break up. I'm just saying that it's very clear when you look at things that there's probably going to be some degree of bifurcation like going on.
Hey, listen, you're talking very logically when you just on a slippery slope projection level. I think it's a natural thing to assume that the next thing that is going to come is really going for some people deeper and deeper into transhumanism. When you see the trends, and thankfully, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just a couple of studies, but it seemed like the sample size was big enough to say that, okay, there's a positive trend here of people that are starting to shrug off, especially in schools, starting to shrug off some of the identity stuff, the dysphoria, all of the identity theories and stuff like that are really damaging to people. But when you consider the millions that have given themselves over to that, even if it's just a person who will go to the ends of the earth to be an ally to somebody with a dysphoric issue, or when they look in the mirror they don't see a human being anymore, they think that they're half squirrel or half whatever the hell it is. I mean, these are real things where I say to myself, well, okay, if you have so many people who have taken the bait and have essentially declared themselves a blank canvas, they are not man, they are not woman, they are not anything, then why not alter yourself in any way? Why not go deeper down the recreation rabbit hole and just start getting augmented in all different ways? I think that at least for a good little sliver, I think there's one hell of a sample or a control group in there that is going to give themselves over gladly to it all. And the rest of us, I don't know, I mean, I don't want to bore you with my American Republic restoration theories, but a breakup, what may look like a breakup to modern Americans, is actually a restoration, because we were not supposed to be this welded together. And maybe we do need to break up some adhesions. I don't know, but man, you gave us a lot to think about tonight, Gigi. And I have your YouTube up. I have your YouTube linked. I have gigiyoung.com over here up on the screen. Let everybody know where they should go, what your streaming schedule is like, your production schedule, your books. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a website there called gigiyoung.com, and I have a membership there, and that just allows me to do my free work basically. But I do 2 live streams there a month, every second Sunday, where you can ask any question, and we go for like 3 or 4 hours, just going deep into any topic, politics, esoterica, whatever you want. And those are all archived. So there's hundreds of hours of these Q&As over the years that I have there. And that just allows me to keep doing my public lectures. And then on YouTube, I will lecture. I try to get out there once a week, but sometimes it's every 10 days or so. I will do, lectures on different occult topics, spiritual topics. I do series as well sometimes on my YouTube channel. I've got different series. Right now I'm doing Occulted there, you can see. And yeah, that's just it. I'm a YouTuber and I have a website, and you can follow me there, and I'd love to see you. And I'm just so glad to be here.
Absolutely. And you know what? I'd like to do it again. If you would too, I'll just, I don't know, we'll have you on early on in the new year, or we always are in need of a good de-occulting, and there's always something crazy going on around us. So this is wonderful meeting you, and I hope you have a great night. Thank you for all the time.
Oh, thank you so much. Have a good one.
All right, everybody. There goes Gigi Young with her debut on Quite Frankly, and you can find her on gigiyoung.com and also on the YouTube, which I have tagged in the description. So we've got about a half hour left, and I want to take your calls now. What do you think? What hit for you? What do you think? I want to know all about it. I also wanted to say thank you once again to Badlands for syndicating us tonight. I know that there are a lot of people having some good times at the first night of the Cocoa Beach GART event. So I don't know. I'm sure that there's there's a good amount of their broadcast crew that is going live, but a lot of people are down there. So we might be one of the few Badlands streams tonight. I hope we filled in a little bit good, and on behalf of everybody that's having a good time in Florida. And hell, that's great. Okay, all right, let's get to your super chats. Quite frankly, superchat.com. And remember, all of your super chats gets you into the running for this incredible this gift basket we're giving away on Saturday. You know what? Before we do that, I'm taking a call from this guy who I haven't heard from in a while. Doc Keck, how the hell are you?
Doing well, Frank. Doing well, man. Finally decided to come back to Earth. I've been up in heaven for a while. And, today's guest was...
It had to. Amazing. It had to have been heaven or something. I mean, you're always bouncing into the Gilded, which is soon to be expired, and also the Discord. So I know you're out there, you're hanging out, but man, it's been a long time since we got a call from you. So what are your thoughts on tonight? Because this is right up your alley.
Oh, it really is up my alley. I really like the fact that she said, that heaven is here. It's not like some foreign destination that you might die to go to. And kind of like Romans 8, that all of creation groans for the sons of God to come. And if all it is, it's kind of like if it's our faith, us, right? Then it is our belief that really carries on and can influence, aspects of the spiritual that are given access and expressed in the natural. And I really like the way that she was saying how it's like something that emanates from you, and then heaven starts to come around you. And she is right. It is a qualia, and that qualia is the presence of the Spirit of the Lord. And once that starts working, because you're in agreement with the Father and the Son and Kingdom, really, which is for me the Holy Spirit, really does start to operate and come around you.
Well, you know what? That sounds like a lot easier way of getting from point A to point B to have it appear around you. I mean, it was just a couple of nights ago when we had Timothy Alberino on the show. I asked him that question again about locality, heaven, whether or not it has locality. He believes that there is a physical location, that heaven is a physical location. But I've always naturally tended to think that it was like a passing. Or maybe not a passing through a veil, but having a veil lifted, and all of a sudden a new set scenery is around you, and you don't really have to go that far.
Not even a new veil, but also like the Spirit coming in and physically restructuring your form so that you could have greater access to, in essence, the third heavens. I really like the way that she was saying how like there's a heaven, there's a natural, and then there's like this subatomic or kind of like underworld kind of thing. I believe in some Christian hierarchies, really, like we live in the first heaven. Then there is a second heaven, kind of like an ethereal plane where the angels and the demons exist. And then there's also a third heaven. And that's like the heaven. That's the kingdom heaven. That's like where they say there are three witnesses in heaven, right? The Father, the Son, and the Spirit. And then it's also said that there are three witnesses on earth: the water, the Spirit, and the blood.
I mean, this is why your calls need to they have to come a little bit more frequently, my man. I'm so happy you were watching tonight.
Oh, I am too. Can I also give a plug?
Yeah, please.
Well?
Yes, please go ahead.
And it's on topic, and it is spiritual, because there is a work that was just completed. It is on SoundCloud. It's over 200 episodes long, and it is by Galactic Progeny. And let's just say that everyone listening knows the drummer.
Okay.
But it is Christian, it is spiritual, it's worship and ministerial. And in essence, what's revealed is the structure of the human soul as revealed by the Holy Spirit, as well as the inheritance that is given to all those who believe.
Okay. Are you the drummer?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
I didn't know that you were a drummer. You didn't know all this time we were kindred in that way, and you never told me?
I know, man. I play conga, so someday, next time I'm up in New York, because I do have family up there. I was up in Connecticut actually, like 2 months ago. So maybe I stop by the studio, we jam out.
Yeah, I know. Well, I have 2 drum sets over here, so we'll see what. In fact, I was going to do drumming. I was going to do a drum stream after the show tonight, but I forgot to put the computer on in the other room, so that's going to take a little bit too much time for me to switch over. So we'll see. But either way, thank you for the call, brother. It's good to hear from you.
Absolutely, many blessings. Thank you so much, Frank.
Take care. Oh, Doc Keck, haven't heard from him in a while. And you know what? Hello to everybody over on Instagram again. This is the first full week that I tried streaming to Instagram as well, especially once again because I figured all of my music copyright issues have been taken care of on the show with all of the new music that we brought in. So why not try to go live everywhere? And there's a lot of people we're meeting over the course of an evening. They come and go. It's not a big crowd, but a jacuzzi's worth. And we'll see how long I can keep that up. Because remember, I got to pay $10 for every 5 hours of transcoding for Instagram so that it shows up perfectly, square instead of blown up and cut off because it's vertical. So we will see. Send a super chat. You can help me fund the Instagram fund or become a sponsor. You can watch it on Instagram, whatever the hell you want. It's a nice little way of taking the show on the road with you. All right, let's see here. I also want to say something. I have to give you guys I have to give a plug to our wonderful sponsor for the evening, and that is Keto Brainz. And ladies and gentlemen, coffee is the world's favorite beverage. I don't know what the hell's second, but I know coffee's one. And you also know something about coffee. It's the world's leading nootropic for the brain. Okay? So why the hell would you ever screw up your coffee with sweeteners and every other crap that gets it? Why not enhance it? Enhance it with something that's non-dairy and non-sugar. And it's just jam-packed full of incredible healthy fats and L-theanine, and just you get this amazing energy and this calm focus and no jitters. I mean it's essential to my life and my work schedule over the last almost 3 years now, and it's been such a wonderful thing to have Molly on as a sponsor over the last year. But I just want to let you know that they've got all holiday bundles out on ketobrainz.com, and there you have it. There's holiday bundles, all types of things where you can just get the mixers and the bags, the product, the samples, whatever the hell it is. There's all types of holiday bundles. Check it out. And guess what? You can use promo code Holiday Frankly, and you get 20% off of your one-time purchase. And if you want to try the stuff, get in touch with me, Frank at quitefrankly.tv. Send me an email. Say, Frank, send me some samples of that Keto Brain stuff. I want to try it out, because you don't have to put it in your coffee. If you like your coffee the way it is, fine. Put it in your food, like Lauren does. Lauren doesn't like to disturb her coffee. She puts her A2 creamer in there, and she's perfectly content. Fine, whatever. Just put it in something else. Put it on your rack of lamb. Sprinkle it on your lamb. So there you go, ketobrainz.com. And Molly's actually going to get in touch. She says that she has an idea for a Thanksgiving giveaway, which is probably going to be ridiculous, because she does nothing but ridiculous things for this audience. So Holiday Frankly, and for you monthly subscribers, I've got a 25% off code for you that I'll be dropping into Patreon and Subscribestar and elsewhere after the show. So just letting you know. Speaking of Lauren, and I'll take a couple more calls. Let's see here. Speaking of Lauren, here is she left me a note about Aurora going to sleep tonight. Aurora had another Dreamland request. She said, tonight in Dreamland, we are going to be venturing to Portrush. It's the coffee house. And she said, bring our stuff to the park and eat and scoot around a little. Scoot around a little bit. Scoot around a little. And then to home to do some work or whatever. And then, quote, back out into the nature to explore. We can bring my magnifying glass and pack my pack and fill it with nature stuff. Okay, Mom, don't forget, put it on a list. I'm definitely, I'm going to work my ass off tomorrow. I'm going to take her to school. By the time we got to pick her up around 12:30, I'm going to make sure that everything is set. I have to come here. I have to clean this place because I got company coming over in the studio Friday night for the broadcast at 7, and then Saturday night for the 9 o'clock special. I want to make sure this place is spick and span. But I'm going to make sure that I am ready to go, because when I take her back home from school, we are going to be doing all that. We're going to go up to the park to scoot around a little bit, and then, maybe we'll stay out there and just be in the nature to explore. Magnifying glass, pack, and we'll fill it with nature stuff. What the hell that means. So there you go. That's what we'll be doing in Dreamland tonight, but I'll make it a reality tomorrow. Okay, let's take a call. 414, you're on the air. Julie, go ahead.
Well, oh my God, I can't believe I got through. How are you, Frank?
I'm doing well.
It's Warrior Biatch.
Oh, hey, good to have you on.
So what are you going to do, like, living in New York? I'm so worried about you because you're so close to it.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not in imminent danger, and I'm not in the city, and it's just most of New York is red rural farmland. You just think about these blue city abominations that are in every red state, by the way. Every red state that has a big city is probably voting blue. It's probably the only, it's just that this is a premier American city that is just, it's a harbinger. That's the thing. If something really, if things really got bad, if it was just like, no, I mean, I would have no problem. I would have to just, we're packing up and we're going to have to go. And I think I could convince my mother to come with us. I think I can convince some of my in-laws to come with us. I think that would be possible. But as of right now, it's just one of those things where is everybody just paying attention? Because New York is not an island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. We're connected. Yeah. We're in the same continent. This is all over the place. It sucks, man. Because when you talk about moving, you're talking about buying yourself time. Maybe you buy one or two generations a little bit of time. The real question is how, if any way, can you help turn the momentum back to some kind of a corrective measure? I don't think there's any corrective measures right now, but no. But there's
kind of the same here in Wisconsin between Madison and Milwaukee. They overtook us and do most of the voting for us. So
yeah, man. I listen, Julie. That's the way I see it too. I mean, there's a lot. Tennessee, that's one of those places where I thought it would be wonderful to relocate. But I know Tennessee's got its issues. Nashville. I've had a couple of friends say, "Hey, listen, you want to drop in for some music or whatever?" But there's issues all over the place. Memphis,
there is.
As long as it's a big city. Now, New York just takes the cake. And when you think about 8 million people, and at least an eighth of them have asked for essentially the Bolshevik revolution to happen here in the U.S. It's a little disconcerting. You think that there's a little bit more than a intellectual pitfall there. It's a spiritual malady. There's a lot of people who are just been infantilized, and they think that it's possible to be taken care of forever. It's ridiculous.
Right, I agree with you.
Anyway.
I mean, even trying to explain to my kids that SNAP benefits are not a good thing. Like, well, no, but I have it coming to me. How do you have it coming to you? How? Like, what did you do for that? Like, just because you exist, you should get food stamps or what? I don't understand.
No, that's what people have been taught. It's all, I don't. Julie, first of all, I got to just say thank you for showing concern, and I appreciate you.
All right, thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay, so I got it coming to me. Well, like I was just saying to Gigi, and I've said to you guys for the good part of the last 15 years or so, The first 5 years, I wasn't really talking about politics too much. But American restoration would actually look a lot more like that. We need a national divorce. It would seem like a national divorce if we were actually just operating constitutionally, because the states would not be beholden to each other. One wouldn't be robbed to be able to pay for the other's stuff and the other's political bullshit. Everybody would just be responsible for their own citizens and their own in-state programs, and the federal government would be doing nothing but negotiating trade and defending the borders and maintaining a navy and maintaining the post office. They wouldn't be doing anything. People would go, but nobody understands that, because federal education, first of all, doesn't want you to know what the government's supposed to be like. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of people believe that they have something coming to them, that it's all good, and there's nothing wrong with people helping each other. But there is a multi-level reason why the federal government was never given, and still does not have the authority to this day, to feed people, clothe people, educate people, and to plan for their retirement. Okay? Your state governments can do it. Counties, whatever the hell it is, it's up to you guys. Localize it. Make it sustainable for you. Don't take down the entire 50, which is what we have here. 43 million people who can't fend for themselves, because it's just, come on in. And it's not even all Americans. So let's see here. All right, into the super chats. Flim Flam Man 1974. By the way, I got in touch with YouTube today. To whatever degree a person can, you go into a chat support, and somebody pretending to be human comes in, and you tell them your issue. And I was saying, listen, people are saying that all of their screen names have disappeared on my channel. I see a difference. But obviously, I'm just one channel on YouTube. Why would one channel be affected and have it not be YouTube wide? Or maybe if it's just channels 100,000 or more, I don't know. I was essentially given the runaround for 40 minutes, told that I have no evidence that there is a problem and that we have to end the chat now. So hopefully this recovers for you. I looked into the chat, the screen name thing, particularly on YouTube, and I don't know what to tell you. They treated me like I was crazy. Flim Flam Man says, how is mom doing since the surgery? Love to the OG of Frank. Well, my mother's doing great, to be honest. She starts, I think she starts PT next week, but I don't think she had to take one dose of pain medicine, which is the thing I was hoping she wouldn't have to do anyway, just because that shit is so dangerous and it constipates you and everything else. But she has been remarkably comfortable. Fine. And that's I think that's been great. Thank you for asking, for all the people who have, and I'm sure she's watching and she's happy that you've been asking after her. Ronin Dosho says, every night you top the previous one. Thank you, brother. And what year is your Bronco? I want to do some research and resources for you. Well, it's an 87, and there's no amount of research that's going to be able to help me. I'm just going to have to accept that I'm in this, and that I have a little ways to go, and that I was swindled. But it's been a very gratifying project, I'll tell you. And I don't know. If I start making appearances, like I say, you become a sponsor of the show through Patreon or anything like that. And one of the things I want to be able to do is make sure that not only I can get guests to travel to New York and come in studio, and I'll put them up at a hotel or something, and start having those attracting people to come in studio and hang out with me. But I love to be able to get on the road and go out there. I love to be able to take that thing on the road, and make an appearance somewhere and do a live broadcast and, have it break down in the middle of Nebraska and be stranded there for 3 weeks. That would be great. So let's see here. Paul says, Wow, fantastic show tonight, Frank. Gigi is a great guest. I really enjoyed the conversation, especially the martyrdom topic. I've never heard it explained this way. It adds some understanding to Genesis 50:20. Thank you, Frank. I'll have to look into that later on. No, the whole idea of you being snuffed out while you are serving a purpose that is higher than yourself and doing so with joy and like really acting and living a vocation and having that taken away, that energy can actually be used by angels, that miracles could happen through you, that it can manifest physically, that there's actually something that's left by, and that's just it's really incredible. And whether or not it's true, or what needs to be added or subtracted from that, it does make me really just wonder and marvel at all the things that we'll never know until it's time to know how all this really works. Because this is just the facing of the clock. This is just the clock face. We get the two hands. We hear the ticking of the seconds. But what's behind it? How does it really work? And and let me meet the clock maker. Let's see here. Lynette says, I wake up every night exactly at 3:14. I would like to think it's a good kind of supernatural event. It makes me feel a little scared sometimes. Well, maybe it's something that is a message or something like that, but it could just be, I don't know. It could just be a habit. Bodies are weird like that. Sometimes you just into a habit. I'll give you an example. There was a couple of weeks where I was off of my fasting routine, and I was just so out of it. I was waking up every night, almost exactly at like 1:51 in the morning. 1:51 in the morning, and I would almost like shoot out of bed, and I would have this screaming pit in my stomach where I did not even try to negotiate at all. I opened my eyes, I felt everything, and I just instinctively walk right downstairs and cheese. I try to make the best decisions I can, but I just ate. I ate. And I didn't know what the hell was going on for a little while there. Because it's one thing, I can't, waking up. But I was waking up every night at like 1:51 in the morning. It was like that last 15 minutes before 2 a.m., that 1:45. That was like my witching hour. I'd get to bed. I was like, good. All right, let me get to bed. As soon as I close my eyes, it'll be 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'll have extended my fast 36. I'll have one. I'll have pushed. Nope, 1:51 in the morning. Eat, you son of a bitch. Get shaken awake. Kevin Polina says, thank you. I needed, so needed now. The truth and power and needed to be born again. Gigi rocks. Thank you, Kevin. And Bowls Dip says, thanks for the years of solid broadcast chops and real human perspective. Art Bell would be proud. Shout out to Tori Says for the raid so long ago. Oh, wow. I think I still see Tori every once in a while on the internet. And somebody will say, like my cousin will get in touch with me every once in a while and say, hey, Tori still, every once in a while she mentions how she loves watching your show. Like, where is she these days? And then all of a sudden I'll see her on Twitter operating under a different name, or so she's still around there, and I hope she's well. Man, that's a throwback for sure. Okay, on to Rumble. Let's see how everybody's doing on Rumble. They seem to be doing well. Everybody's feeling good. Good on Badlands. Look at it. Everybody's just feeling the love. Miss Day 444 on Badlands says, supporting this awesome conversation. Thank you, Frank and Gigi. Well, thank you, Miss Day. It's good to have you out there, Miss. And on quitefrankly.tv, let's see, Safety Net 820, putting my name in the running for the basket. Love you, Lynn. Stephen and Lori says, oh, please add us in for the gift basket and magazine. You're amazing to us listeners. Don't worry, anybody. I'll put it all in tonight. I have everything already saved. I've been taking note every day of the week. And Saturday night we'll make the announcement. Then I'll make the announcement again on Monday for people who don't tune in on Saturday. But you should. It's a lot of fun. Nathan says, Gigi is great. I hope she's a regular guest. Me too. Chatty KC says, thank you for giving us knowledge on this topic. Interesting. 123 SKG says, great topic tonight. Sean Joe, thank you. Warrior Biatch, who called in, says, I really want that basket. Love you guys so much. Thank you, Frank and family. Here's all my pills, says Warrior Biatch. You know what it is? The next raffle we do after this week, I'm going to start counting everybody. Every time you put in a super chat, I'm counting it. So if you put in a super chat on Monday and on Wednesday, you got 2 shots to win. That's just what it is. I'm just going to go like a real raffle. Real raffle, you don't limit people to one entry. I'm just going to count everybody. And doesn't, you got to be in to win it one way or another. Doesn't mean you can't defy the odds. Sean Joe, thank you. The Sentinel says, off topic, but former VP Dick Cheney died on Tuesday. There has not been any acknowledgement from the White House. Flags are not ordered to half staff. Nothing says you hurt me, Fredo, louder. On the flip side, he probably voted for MY, VA and NJ onto. Oh yeah, yes, for NY. He probably voted in all 3 of those places. Yes, absolutely. I didn't even notice. I didn't notice. Like Jay said last night, it's just like, who the hell cares? Who the hell cares? Obviously, he was never going to face judgment on this earth. And no one can say what he's facing right now because no one knows his heart. But he was responsible for the death of at least 1 million people. And a lot of people share that responsibility, but he was a very, very up there. He was up there with in the architecture of it all. So that's what we have. I also want to say thank you to Rev last night, Revolution. I don't know why YouTube didn't populate inside of the Streamlabs. Says Jay and Silver, best show ever. So I'll just try to. I'll have to check multiple places from now on. I don't know why Streamlabs did that. And also to Dean Lind last night. I think that's my buddy from Wisconsin. Says best content right here, quite frankly. That also did not show up in the Streamlabs last night. But I went to go check it on YouTube, and what do you know? There it was. And I see everybody's screen names. So that's what we have. All right. On the flip side tonight, we'll just stay here. We'll take one more call. Joy, go ahead.
Hey, Frank.
Whatever the hell it is, it's up to you guys.
Hello?
Hello. Yeah, you got to turn off the stream.
Oh,
Take down the
sorry. So your last guest was so great.
The guest tonight, Gigi?
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you liked it. Give us some parting thoughts.
So I often think when I'm sitting here, when I'm in desperate need, I pray to my grandma, and I actually think she's with me. And your guest made me think that that's possible.
Well, I'm with you as well. I'm with you as well. I believe that, if we can receive prayers for intercession from believers here on earth, I believe that we can receive prayers for intercession from Christians and believers in heaven. And
yeah, but I never heard anybody say that before.
Well, I'm glad you heard it tonight, and maybe you do feel. I hope that you do feel the presence of family who have passed on that are still close to you in some ethereal way. That I hope you feel that presence.
I do. Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Joy. Thank you for calling in and ending the show in such a nice way.
All right, thanks.
All right. It's true. You know, that's not going to work for everybody. I know the opinions out there, but they are just opinions. I don't think they are, but they are just opinions. And I don't know. I always just wish you guys the best. Now, listen, in the second, on the flip side, last night we actually had like a flip side viewership record. Okay. I want to bring you guys the flip side again. I'm going to drop the link into the chat room. Come on over because there's a few things I want to do. I'm going to watch some reels with you. I'm also going to watch a moment last night. I think it was yesterday. Brandon Joe Williams sent a super chat into Nick Fuentes and tried to pitch him on part of what he does in drawing the lines between, you know, who really has citizenship, who's a citizenship, white people, black people, all that stuff. Just, you know, doing his thing, trying to get the best elevator pitch for his work into a super chat. And it caused a really funny reaction. I want to watch it with you. And that will be something there too. I'm going to read all of your continued gold pills that come in, and that'll be fun. That'll be really, really fun. All right. So thank you guys. Thank you to everybody that's watching on Instagram again. It's good to have new audiences, you know, see us. And I hope that you are. Yeah, let's see. A fly with AI says your lava lamp looks like candy corn right now. Yeah, you know what it is? It's getting cold in here during the day. So what I'm going to have to do is, starting tonight, I'm going to have to put my my Quite Frankly Jester hat on top of here to be almost like a lava lamp warmer, because these lava lamps, the modern lava lamps, don't get hot. They don't get hot anymore. They have these weak little lamps in there, and if the temperature of the room is lower than 75 degrees, it's going to take either 12 hours to heat up, or it'll just stay like this. Okay, the wax doesn't start flowing. So I'm going to put the wool hat on it, and that's how we'll get it to start flowing again, because it is the fall and winter months, and that's just what we deal with over here. If you know, you know, and now you do. But yeah, thank you, all you that's watching. If this is the first time you are watching the show, we do this weeknights, Monday through Thursday, especially 7 o'clock to 9 p.m. You can watch us everywhere, but the home base for everything, quite frankly, is quitefrankly.tv. That's where you'll get links to everywhere that we're at, all the archives, how to become a sponsor of the show, and thank you all so much. And if you want some keto brain samples, email me, frank@quitefrankly.tv. It's going to change your life. It's going to change your life. It really is. Thank you all so much. I'll catch you on the flip side. Check out those chat rooms for the link. Be well.
I'll catch you on the flip side.
Oh, thank you, everybody. As I'm sitting here playing my piano, it's good to have you back. And I'll see you tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. We'll be live for the Playhouse with my brother and special guests. I will be sharing that link everywhere that I can share that link, on Twitter, on Rumble, and everywhere else. And I think you guys are going to really love it. So don't take the night off tomorrow. Don't take the night off, because I'm not off. And I'll see you on Saturday at 9 o'clock on quitefrankly.tv. That will also be replayed the following Friday. Oh, it's a good day. It's a good day. Good night. Thank you.
Goodbye.
All right. That's it. Thanks, everybody.